The dust had not yet settled from the stones they threw, and Eleanor Voss could still feel the sting of their hatred on her skin as she began the long walk back to Butte, Montana on foot. 3 months had passed since they ran her out of town on a rail, accused of being a thief when all she had done was refuse the banker's son's advances. Marcus Whitfield had money and influence, and when she rejected his proposal, he made sure the whole town believed she had stolen from his father's safe. They gave her 1 hour to leave, and she had walked through a gauntlet of people she once called neighbors, their faces twisted with judgment and disgust. She had fled to Helena, working in a boarding house, saving every penny, but the truth ate at her like a canker. Her father was buried in Butte. Her mother's wedding ring was hidden beneath a floorboard in the house she had grown up in, the house they had taken from her. She had nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. The road stretched before her like a ribbon of impossible hope. It was June of 1884, and the Montana Territory sun beat down without mercy. She had walked for 2 days already, her boots worn thin, her water nearly gone. The mountains rose in the distance, beautiful and indifferent. She figured she had another week of walking ahead of her, maybe more. Every step was an act of defiance. She heard the horse before she saw him. The steady clip of hooves on packed earth, the creak of leather. Eleanor did not turn around. She had learned not to trust men on lonely roads. She kept walking, her hand moving instinctively to the small knife she kept in her pocket. "You are going to die out here," a voice said, low and certain. Eleanor stopped then, turning to face him. The cowboy sat astride a dappled gray horse, his hat pulled low against the sun. He was young, maybe 25, with a face weathered by wind and work. His eyes were the color of creek water, gray-blue and clear. There was no threat in his posture, only a strange kind of concern. "Then I will die walking towards something instead of running away from it," she said, her voice hoarse from thirst. He studied her for a long moment, then swung down from his horse with an easy grace. He pulled a canteen from his saddle and held it out to her. "Where are you headed?" Eleanor wanted to refuse, but her throat was too dry, her pride already stretched thin. She took the canteen and drank, the water lukewarm but precious. "But," she said finally, something flickered across his face, surprise maybe or recognition. "That is a long walk, I am aware." "Why are you walking?" "Because I have no horse." He almost smiled at that, just the barest hint of it at the corner of his mouth. "I meant, why are you going back to Butte? I was there last month, heard some talk about a woman who was run out of town. Eleanor Voss. They said she was a thief." Eleanor felt her spine stiffen, her chin lift. "Then you heard lies." "I figured as much," he said quietly. "I have seen that kind of lie before. Usually it is wrapped around a rich man's pride." She stared at him, searching his face for mockery or judgment, but found neither. "Who are you?" "Xander Cross. I work the ranches, go where the work is. I was heading west, but I can ride north just as easy." He gestured to his horse. "You can ride, I will walk. I do not need charity." "It is not charity, it is common sense." "You will not make it to Butte on foot, not in this heat, not without supplies." He paused, his eyes steady on hers. "And if you are going back to face down the people who cast you out, you should arrive strong, not half dead from walking." There was logic in his words, but more than that, there was something in his manner that made her want to trust him. Maybe it was the directness of his gaze, or the way he had not flinched when she mentioned Butte. Maybe it was just that she was so tired of being alone. "I will walk," she said finally, "but if you want to ride beside me, I will not stop you." Xander nodded slowly, as if he had expected nothing else. "Then I will ride beside you." They set out together, Eleanor on foot, Xander on his horse moving at a slow walk beside her. For the first hour, they did not speak. The sun climbed higher, and the land spread out around them in waves of golden grass and scrub pine. Eleanor could feel Xander's presence like a steady warmth, neither pressing nor distant. It was strange to have company after so long alone. "Tell me about Butte," Xander said finally. "What are you going back for?" Eleanor considered lying, or telling him it was none of his concern, but something about the openness of the sky and the rhythm of walking made her want to speak the truth. "My name," she said. "They took everything else, but I will have my name back. I will stand in front of Marcus Whitfield and the whole town, and I will make them see the truth. What if they do not want to see it? Then I will make them hear it." Xander was quiet for a moment. "That takes courage." "It takes desperation," she corrected. "Courage is when you have a choice." "You have a choice," he said. "You could start over somewhere new, change your name, build a different life." Eleanor shook her head. "That would be living with their lie branded on me. I would always be running." "I want to stand still again." She saw him nod, a slow, thoughtful movement. "I understand that. Do you?" "I left Texas 5 years ago," Xander said, his voice even. "My father was a gambler, ran up debts he could not pay. When he died, the men he owed came for me. Said I had to make good on his promises. I could have stayed and worked myself to death paying for his mistakes, or I could leave. I left. But I think about it sometimes, wonder if I should have stayed and fought." "Why did you not?" "Because I was 18 and scared, and I did not see another choice." He glanced down at her. "But you are not scared, are you?" Eleanor laughed, a dry sound. "I am terrified, but fear is just another weight to carry." They walked on as the day stretched long and golden. Xander shared his food with her when they stopped to rest, jerky and hardtack, and an apple he said he had been saving. Eleanor tried to refuse, but he simply set the food beside her and looked away, giving her the dignity of choice. She ate, and it was the best meal she had tasted in weeks. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Xander made camp in a small grove of cottonwoods near a creek. He tended to his horse, then built a fire with practiced efficiency. Eleanor watched him work, noting the way his hands moved with certainty, the way he seemed at ease in the wilderness. "You do not have to stay with me," she said as the stars began to appear. "I know you said you were heading west." Xander looked up from the fire, his face half in shadow. "I am where I want to be." Something in the way he said it made Eleanor's heart skip. She looked away, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the firelight, the quiet of the night around them. "You do not even know me. I know you are walking 200 miles to reclaim your name. I know you would rather die of thirst than accept help you think you do not deserve. I know you loved your father enough to go back for his memory." He paused. "That is enough to know." Eleanor felt heat rise in her face that had nothing to do with the fire. "You see a great deal for a man who has known me less than a day." "I pay attention," Xander said simply. That night, Eleanor lay in her bedroll on one side of the fire while Xander took the other. She stared up at the vast bowl of stars and listened to the sound of his breathing, steady and calm. For the first time in 3 months, she did not feel alone. It was a dangerous feeling, she knew. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. But as she drifted toward sleep, she let herself imagine what it might be like to have someone ride beside her not just for a day, but for all the days ahead. The next morning brought clouds and the promise of rain. They set out early, falling into the rhythm they had established the day before. Xander told her stories about the ranches he had worked, about breaking horses and mending fences, and the time he had helped drive a herd from Wyoming to Dakota Territory. Eleanor found herself laughing at his descriptions of stubborn cattle and ornery ranch cooks, the sound strange in her own ears. "What did you do in Butte?" Xander asked as they followed the road north. "Before." "I worked in the general store," Eleanor said. "My father was a carpenter. He built half the houses in Butte before his heart gave out 2 years ago. After he died, I kept working, kept living in our house. It was enough. It was a good life. Until Marcus Whitfield. Eleanor nodded, her jaw tightening. He started coming into the store every day. At first, I thought he was just being friendly. Then he asked me to dinner and I said no. He asked again and again. The fourth time, I told him plainly I had no interest in courting him. He smiled and said I would change my mind. A week later, his father's safe was found open, money missing. Marcus told the sheriff he had seen me in his father's study the day before. It was a lie. I had never been in that house. But the Whitfields owned half the businesses in town, including the bank. Who was going to believe me? Where was the money really? I would wager Marcus took it himself and hid it away. Or maybe there was no money missing at all. It does not matter. The lie was enough. Xander's hands tightened on the reins. Men like that make me ashamed of my own gender. Not all men are like that, Eleanor said, surprising herself. She glanced up at him. Some men ride beside women who have lost everything and ask for nothing in return. Xander met her eyes and something passed between them, quick and bright as lightning. Maybe those men are just hoping to become the kind of men worth riding beside. The rain started that afternoon, a light drizzle that gradually became a steady downpour. They took shelter under an overhang of rock, huddled close to stay dry. Xander draped his coat over Eleanor's shoulders without asking, and she let him, too cold and wet to protest. They sat side by side, watching the rain sheet down in silver curtains. "Tell me about your mother," Xander said quietly. Eleanor was surprised by the question, by the gentleness of it. "She died when I was 16. Pneumonia. She was from Boston originally, came west with my father when they married. She used to say Montana was too big, too wild, but she loved it anyway. She loved my father more." Eleanor paused, her throat tight. "She had a wedding ring, silver with a small sapphire. My father could not afford much, but he saved for a year to buy that ring. When she died, he gave it to me. He said I should have it for when I married. I hid it under the floorboards in my bedroom before they ran me out. I did not want Marcus or his father to find it if they searched the house." "We will get it back," Xander said, and the certainty in his voice made it almost seem possible. "Why are you doing this?" Eleanor asked, turning to look at him. "Really? You could be in any town doing any work. Why are you here with me?" Xander was quiet for a long time, his eyes on the rain. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "When I left Texas, I swore I would never run from anything again. But I have been running for 5 years. Not from people, but from belonging anywhere. I go where the work is, I earn my pay, I move on. I have not let myself care about anything or anyone because caring means risk, and risk means pain. But then I saw you walking down that road, and I knew if I rode past you, I would be running again. From something real, from something that matters." Eleanor's breath caught. "You do not know me," she said again, but her voice was softer this time. "Then let me know you," Xander said. "Let me ride beside you, not just to Butte, but wherever you want to go after. Let me be part of your fight. What if I fail? What if they do not listen? Then we will figure out what comes next together." Eleanor looked at him, at the honesty in his face, the hope carefully guarded but still visible in his eyes. She thought about the 3 months of loneliness, the weight of carrying her anger and her pain alone. She thought about the way he had offered her water without making her beg, the way he listened as if her words mattered. She thought about how it felt to laugh again. "I do not know if I can trust this," she whispered. "Trust you, trust anything." "You do not have to decide right now," Xander said. "Just let me keep riding beside you. The rest will come or it will not." The rain eased as evening approached, and they made camp in a clearing surrounded by pine trees. Xander caught 2 fish from a nearby stream and they cooked them over the fire, eating with their fingers, savoring the fresh food. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke, and the world felt newly washed clean. "My father used to take me fishing," Eleanor said as she watched the flames dance. "Every Sunday after church, we would go to the creek outside town. He said it was important to be still sometimes, to let the world move around you instead of always pushing through it." Sounds like a wise man. He was. He never judged anyone, never spoke ill of his neighbors. When he died, half of Butte came to his funeral. "Those same people ran me out of town 2 years later." She shook her head. "I do not understand how people can be so quick to forget kindness." "Fear," Xander said. "People are afraid of losing their place in the world, so they side with the ones who have power. It is easier than standing up for what is right." "Were you ever afraid like that?" "Every day," Xander admitted. "In Texas, I watched my father's friends turn away when the debt collectors came. People we had known for years, people my father had helped, and they would not even meet my eyes. I was angry for a long time. But then I realized they were just scared. It does not excuse it, but it helps explain it." "You still hate them?" "No, but I do not forget either." They talked late into the night, sharing stories and silences in equal measure. Eleanor found herself telling Xander things she had never told anyone, about her mother's love of poetry, about her father's terrible singing voice, about the dreams she had once had of opening her own shop. Xander listened to all of it with the same steady attention, never interrupting, never dismissing. When she finally fell asleep, it was with a sense of peace she had not felt in longer than she could remember. The days that followed fell into a pattern. They would wake with the sun, share a simple breakfast, and then set out on the road. Eleanor walked, her strength returning with regular food and water. Xander rode beside her, sometimes talking, sometimes singing old cowboy songs in a surprisingly good voice. He taught her how to identify animal tracks, how to read the weather in the clouds, how to find north by the stars. In turn, she told him about books she had read, about the history of Butte and the mines that had made it rich, about the flowers that grew wild in the Montana summer. On the 5th day, they reached a small settlement, barely more than a trading post and a few houses. Xander bought supplies while Eleanor waited outside, not wanting to draw attention. When he returned, he had a package wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said, handing it to her. Eleanor unwrapped it to find a new pair of boots, sturdy and well-made. She looked up at him, her eyes suddenly hot with tears. "Xander, I cannot accept this. I have no money to repay you." "I am not asking for repayment. Your boots have holes in them. You need new ones." He smiled at her, that almost smile she was coming to treasure. "Let someone do something kind for you, Eleanor, not because you owe them, but because they want to." She put on the boots and they fit perfectly. As they left the settlement behind, Eleanor found herself walking a little taller, her steps more sure. It was not just the boots, she knew. It was the man who had given them to her, the man who saw her not as a scandal or a shame, but simply as Eleanor. That night, they camped beside a lake that reflected the stars like scattered diamonds. The air was warm, almost balmy, and they sat close to the water's edge, listening to the sound of frogs and the distant call of a loon. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had made different choices?" Eleanor asked. "All the time," Xander said. "But I am starting to think that all those choices, good and bad, led me to exactly where I am supposed to be." "Where is that?" "Here, with you." Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. She turned to look at him and found him already watching her. In the starlight, his eyes were dark and deep, full of something she was almost afraid to name. "Xander, I am not whole," she said, her voice shaking. "I am angry and broken, and I do not know if I can be what you want me to be." I do not want you to be anything except who you are, he said. And you are not broken, Eleanor. You are surviving. You are fighting. That is not weakness, it is strength. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. What if we get to Butte and they laugh at me? What if Marcus lies again and they believe him? Then we leave. We shake the dust of that town off our feet and we go somewhere new. Somewhere you can start fresh with your name cleared in your own heart, if nowhere else. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm. But I do not think they will laugh. I think they will see what I see. A woman who is stronger than any of them. Eleanor squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, staring out at the starlit water. Something was growing between them, tender and fierce and undeniable. Eleanor could feel it taking root in her chest, both terrifying and exhilarating. The next morning, Xander taught her how to ride his horse. They took turns, walking and riding in shifts, and Eleanor found she loved the feeling of being high up, seeing the world from a new vantage. Xander walked beside the horse, one hand on the bridle, and Eleanor felt safe in a way she had not in years. "You are a natural," Xander said, grinning up at her, "or your horse is very patient. Both can be true." They passed other travelers on the road now. Miners heading to the camps, families in wagons, cowboys driving small herds. People stared at them sometimes, at the sight of a woman alone with a man who was clearly not her husband, but Xander met their gazes steadily until they looked away. He was protecting her reputation just by riding beside her openly, Eleanor realized. If he had been trying to hide their association, people would have assumed the worst. By being visible, he was making a statement. This woman is under my protection, and anyone who questions her answers to me. It made her feel both grateful and guilty. "You are going to have people talking about you too," she said as they made camp that evening. "Let them talk. I have been talked about before. Words do not hurt me. They hurt me, I know." Xander looked at her seriously. "But only because the words in Butte cost you everything. When we get there, we are going to make sure that never happens again." On the 8th day of their journey, they crested a hill and saw Butte spread out in the valley below. The town was bigger than Eleanor remembered, sprawling and busy, smoke rising from dozens of mines and smelters. The sight of it made her stomach clench with a mixture of dread and determination. "We can wait until tomorrow," Xander said quietly. "Ride in fresh in the morning." Eleanor shook her head. "No, I want to do this now before I lose my nerve." They rode into town in the late afternoon, the sun slanting low and golden. People turned to stare as they passed, recognition dawning on faces that had once been familiar. Eleanor kept her head high, her hands steady on the reins. Xander rode beside her, his presence a solid anchor. They stopped in front of the general store where Eleanor had once worked. A new girl stood behind the counter, young and nervous-looking. Eleanor dismounted and walked to the door, Xander a step behind her. "I am looking for Marcus Whitfield," she said clearly. The girl's eyes went wide. "Miss Voss, is that you?" "It is. Where is Marcus?" "I think he is at his father's bank, but Miss Voss, I do not think you should be here." People said lies," Eleanor interrupted. "I am here to set the record straight." She walked out of the store and across the street to the bank, aware of the crowd gathering behind her, the whispers rising like a tide. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest, but she kept walking. Xander was right beside her, his hand resting on his hip near his gun, not threatening but watchful. The bank was cool and dim after the bright street. Mr. Whitfield, Marcus's father, stood behind the counter, his face going pale when he saw Eleanor. "You are not welcome here," he said, his voice shaking. "I am not here for a welcome. I am here for the truth." Eleanor's voice rang out clear and strong. "3 months ago, your son accused me of theft. He lied. I never touched your safe, never took a single dollar, and you know it." "How dare you come in here and make accusations? Where is Marcus?" Eleanor demanded. "Let him face me. Let him look me in the eye and call me a thief." There was movement in the back room, and Marcus appeared, his handsome face arranged in an expression of shock and outrage. "Eleanor Voss, you have some nerve showing your face in this town." "I have nerve," Eleanor laughed, sharp and bitter. "You ran me out of town because I would not marry you. You lied and turned my neighbors against me because your pride could not stand rejection. You are a coward, Marcus Whitfield." Marcus's face flushed red. "I told the truth. You stole from my father. Then where is your proof? Where is the money I supposedly took? Where were the witnesses?" Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You have none because it never happened. You lied, and everyone believed you because your father owns half this town." "You cannot prove I lied," Marcus said, but his voice wavered. "No," Xander said, speaking for the first time. His voice was low and dangerous. "But you cannot prove she stole either, and from where I stand, that makes you the liar." Marcus's eyes flicked to Xander, taking in the gun at his hip, the hard set of his jaw. "Who are you?" "Someone who believes her." The crowd had pressed into the bank now, filling the doorway, spilling out into the street. Eleanor could see faces she recognized, people who had known her father, who had bought goods from her at the store. Mrs. Chen, who always asked for extra ribbon. Old Mr. Morrison, who had been her father's friend. They were watching, listening. "Did any of you see me steal?" Eleanor asked, turning to face them. "Did any of you see me do anything except work honestly and live quietly? Or did you just believe Marcus because it was easier than standing up to the Whitfields?" The silence was thick and heavy. Then Mrs. Chen stepped forward, her face troubled. "I never believed it," she said quietly. "Your father was the most honest man I ever knew. I could not imagine his daughter being a thief, but I did not speak up. I am sorry, Eleanor." "I did not believe it either," Mr. Morrison said, his voice gruff. "But I held my tongue. It was wrong." Others began to murmur agreement, a ripple spreading through the crowd. Eleanor saw Marcus's face go from red to white, saw the moment he realized the town was turning against him. "This is absurd," Mr. Whitfield blustered. "My son would not lie. There is no reason, there is every reason," Xander said. "Pride. Revenge. The belief that he could do whatever he wanted because his father has money and power." He looked at Marcus with contempt. "I have met 100 men like you. You think the world owes you whatever you want. When it does not, you take it anyway, or you destroy the person who denied you." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. His eyes darted around the room, looking for support and finding none. "This is ridiculous. Father, do something." But Mr. Whitfield was staring at his son, and Eleanor saw the terrible dawning of understanding in his eyes. "Marcus, tell me you did not do this." "Father, did you lie about this girl?" The silence stretched out, agonizing. Finally, Marcus's shoulders slumped. "She humiliated me," he said, his voice small and petulant. "Everyone knew I was courting her, and she rejected me in front of half the town. I just wanted to teach her a lesson. I did not think it would go so far." The crowd erupted in angry voices. Eleanor felt her knees go weak, and Xander's hand was suddenly on her elbow, steadying her. She had won. She had actually won. "Get out," Mr. Whitfield said to his son, his voice shaking with rage. "Get out of my sight." Marcus fled, pushing through the crowd. Mr. Whitfield turned to Eleanor, his face gray. "Miss Voss, I owe you an apology and restitution. Your house was sold, but I will buy it back. Your belongings should still be in storage. I will see that everything is returned to you." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. The crowd pressed closer, voices calling out apologies, offering hands to shake. It was overwhelming, dizzying. Xander's hand on her arm was the only thing keeping her grounded. "Come on," he murmured in her ear. "Let us get you out of here." He led her through the crowd and back out into the evening air. They walked to the edge of town, to a small park overlooking the valley. Eleanor sank down onto a bench, her whole body shaking. "I did it," she whispered. "I actually did it." "You did," Xander said, sitting beside her. "You were magnificent." Eleanor looked at him, at this man who had ridden beside her every step of the way, who had believed in her when she barely believed in herself. "I could not have done it without you." "Yes, you could have, but I am glad you did not have to." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "What happens now? What do you want to happen?" Eleanor thought about her house, about sleeping in her own bed again, about reclaiming the life that had been stolen from her. But more than that, she thought about the nights under the stars, about Xander's stories and his laughter, and the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She thought about the way her heart felt full for the first time in years. "I want you to stay," she said. "I want you to stop wandering and stay here with me. I want to see if this thing between us is real, if it can grow into something lasting." Xander's face split into a wide, genuine smile, the first she had seen from him. It transformed him, made him look younger and lighter. "I thought you would never ask. Is that a yes?" "That is a yes to everything. To staying, to building something real, to whatever comes next as long as it is with you." Eleanor felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were not tears of pain or anger. They were tears of relief, of joy, of hope finally fulfilled. "I think I am falling in love with you," she said. "I think I fell in love with you the moment I saw you walking down that road, too stubborn to quit," Xander said. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Can I kiss you, Eleanor Voss?" "Yes," she whispered. His lips met hers softly, tentatively, a question and an answer all at once. Eleanor leaned into the kiss, into him, letting herself feel all the things she had been afraid to feel. Love and trust and the terrifying, wonderful possibility of a future. When they finally pulled apart, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. "Come on," Eleanor said, standing and pulling him up with her. "I want to go get my mother's ring." They walked back to Eleanor's old house together. The new owners were a young couple who had heard what happened at the bank, and they were eager to let Eleanor retrieve her belongings. She pried up the loose floorboard in her old bedroom, and there it was, wrapped in a scrap of cloth. The silver ring with its small sapphire, exactly as she had left it. Eleanor held it in her palm, feeling the weight of memory and love. "My mother wore this for 20 years, she said softly. "Through good times and hard times, through sickness and health. My father gave it to me because he believed I would find someone worth sharing my life with. I think he would have liked you." "I wish I could have met him," Xander said. "He raised an incredible daughter." They left the house and walked to the cemetery on the outskirts of town. Eleanor knelt beside her father's grave, weathered but well tended, and told him everything that had happened. Xander stood back, giving her privacy, but when she reached for his hand, he was there. "I think he would be proud of you," Xander said as they walked back toward town. "I think he would be proud of both of us," Eleanor replied. Mr. Whitfield was as good as his word. Within a week, he had bought back Eleanor's house and returned all her belongings. He also offered her a position as bookkeeper at the bank, with a salary that made her gasp. "It is the least I can do," he said gruffly. "And you are the most honest person I know. I need that after what my son did." Eleanor accepted and began rebuilding her life in Butte. But this time, she was not alone. Xander found work at a ranch just outside of town, breaking horses and training them. He rode into Butte every evening to see Eleanor, and they would walk through the town together, heads high, making new memories to replace the painful ones. The whispers about them changed from judgment to speculation of a more hopeful kind. People wondered when Xander would propose, when there would be a wedding. Eleanor found herself wondering the same thing, but she was content to let time unfold naturally. They had the rest of their lives, after all. 6 months after their return to Butte, on a cold December evening, Xander came to Eleanor's house carrying a small wooden box. She let him in, smiling at the sight of him stamping snow off his boots. He had become a fixture in her life, as essential as breathing. "I made you something," he said, handing her the box. Inside was a ring, simple and beautiful, carved from wood and inlaid with a small piece of turquoise. It was not fancy, but it was made with care and skill, every detail perfect. "I know it is not much," Xander said, suddenly nervous. "I know you probably expected something grander, but I wanted to make it myself, wanted it to be from my hands to yours." "Xander, it is perfect," Eleanor breathed. "Eleanor Voss, you are the bravest person I have ever met. You are strong and fierce and kind, and you make me want to be a better man every single day. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Will you marry me?" Eleanor looked at the ring, then at Xander's hopeful face, and felt her heart swell until she thought it might burst. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. Eleanor melted into him, into the promise of forever, into the love that had grown from dust and determination into something unbreakable. They were married in February of 1885, in the same church where Eleanor's father had taken her every Sunday. The whole town turned out for the wedding, eager to celebrate the woman who had stood up to lies and won, and the man who had stood beside her. Mrs. Chen made Eleanor's dress, a beautiful creation of cream silk and lace. Mr. Morrison walked Eleanor down the aisle, standing in for her father with tears in his eyes. When Xander saw Eleanor walking toward him, his face lit up with such joy that several people in the congregation started crying. They exchanged vows in steady voices, promising to love and honor each other through whatever life brought them. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed Eleanor like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The reception was held in the town hall, with music and dancing and enough food to feed half of Montana. Eleanor danced with her new husband, laughing as he spun her around the floor, and felt happier than she had ever been. "I never thought I would have this," she said as they swayed together. "A few months ago I was walking down a dusty road with nothing but anger and fear. Now I have everything." "We have everything," Xander corrected, "and we are just getting started." They moved into Eleanor's house, which became their house, filling it with laughter and love. Xander continued working at the ranch, and Eleanor kept her position at the bank. They became pillars of the community, the kind of people others looked to for help and guidance. Eleanor started a library in Butte, donating many of her own books and soliciting donations from others. Xander taught riding lessons to local children, patient and kind, and became known as the best horseman in the county. A year after their wedding, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. She told Xander over dinner, watching his face cycle through shock and joy and a touching hint of fear. "I am going to be a father," he said, his voice cracking. "You are going to be a father," Eleanor confirmed. Xander whooped with joy, then immediately became solemn. "I am going to do better than my father. I am going to be present and steady, and I am going to love this child with everything I have." "I know you will," Eleanor said, taking his hand. "You are already the best man I know." Their son was born in October of 1886, a healthy baby with his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Thomas Henry Cross, after both of Eleanor's parents. Xander cried when he held his son for the first time, overcome with the enormity of it all. "Hello, Thomas," he whispered. "I am your father, and I promise I will never let you down." Eleanor watched them together, her two loves, and knew that she had found something she had thought lost forever. A family, a home, a place where she belonged completely. Thomas was followed 3 years later by a daughter they named Sarah Margaret, and then 2 years after that by another son, Daniel James. Their house rang with the sound of children's laughter, with arguments and games and bedtime stories. Xander was a devoted father, patient and playful, teaching his children to ride and to care for the land. Eleanor was fierce in her love, determined that her children would grow up knowing their own worth, never doubting their place in the world. The years passed in a blur of golden moments. Christmases around the fireplace, summers spent swimming in the creek, autumn evenings watching the leaves turn gold. Xander and Eleanor grew older together, their love deepening and maturing like fine wine. They had their disagreements, of course, their difficult days, but they faced them together, remembering the road that had brought them to each other. Marcus Whitfield left Butte shortly after the truth came out, and no one heard from him again. His father ran the bank for another 10 years before retiring and turning it over to Eleanor. She became the first female bank president in Montana Territory, a fact that made Xander endlessly proud. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Xander took Eleanor back to the spot where they had first met, where he had offered her water and changed the course of both their lives. The road was the same, winding through golden grass toward distant mountains, but everything else had changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked as they sat on a blanket watching the sunset. "Stopping for me that day." Xander turned to her, his face weathered but still handsome, his eyes still that same creek water gray-blue. "Regret you? Eleanor, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Every good thing in my life stems from the moment I decided to ride beside you." "I was so angry that day," Eleanor said softly. "So hurt and scared. I did not know if I would survive the walk, let alone survive with my heart intact. Then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not known how to pray. I was lost until I found you," Xander said. "Wandering from place to place, never settling, never letting myself feel anything real. You taught me how to be brave, how to fight for something that matters." Eleanor leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "We taught each other." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned crimson and gold, then purple and deep blue. Stars began to appear, the same stars that had watched over them all those years ago. In the distance, they could see the lights of Butte beginning to glow, a town that had cast Eleanor out and then welcomed her home, a town where they had built a life beyond anything either of them had imagined. "I love you," Eleanor said. "I have loved you since you offered me water on a dusty road. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Xander replied. "You are my home, Eleanor. You always have been." They rode back to Butte as the stars wheeled overhead, side by side as they had always been, as they would always be. The road that had once seemed so long and impossible was now just a memory, a story they told their grandchildren in years to come about courage and determination, and the kind of love that changes everything. Their children grew and had children of their own, and Eleanor and Xander became the beloved patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling, joyful family. They grew old together, their hands clasped as tightly at 70 as they had been at 25. When Xander's hair turned silver, Eleanor would run her fingers through it and remember the young cowboy, who had ridden beside her when she had nothing. When Eleanor's hands became gnarled with arthritis, Xander would massage them gently and remember the fierce woman who had walked 200 miles to reclaim her name. In the spring of 1920, Xander passed away quietly in his sleep, Eleanor's hand in his. She grieved deeply, but not bitterly. They had been given 35 years together, 35 years of love and laughter, and building something beautiful. She wore both rings on her finger, the wooden one Xander had made her and her mother's silver one, twin symbols of the love that had defined her life. Eleanor lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them bearing the legacy of two people who had refused to let circumstance define them. On her final day, at the age of 79, Eleanor looked out her window at the Montana sky and smiled. She had lived a full life, a good life, a life made possible by a dusty road and a cowboy who had chosen to ride beside her. When the people of Butte gathered for Eleanor's funeral, they told stories about her courage, her kindness, her strength. But the story they told most often was the one about how she had walked back to a town that cast her out, and how Xander Cross had ridden beside her every step of the way, and how that journey had become a love story for the ages. It was a story of redemption and faith, and the transformative power of someone who sees you at your lowest and chooses to lift you up. It was a story of the West, of hard land and harder choices, and the kind of love that makes both bearable. And in the cemetery overlooking Butte, 2 headstones stood side by side, just as Xander and Eleanor had stood side by side in life. The inscriptions were simple, their names, their dates, and beneath, the words they rode together into forever.